It took me years to understand this, but I am going to give it to you straight. The night I opened my door to a soaked stranger was the night I almost put my kids in danger and accidentally touched a secret that could topple an empire. I still feel ashamed to admit how close I came to locking the door and pretending I didn't hear him. I'm Amber Reed, a single mom trying to hold life together with both hands in a forgotten corner called Pine Hollow on the edge of a big Midwestern city. That night, the power was out, the roof was leaking, and I could only think about keeping Mia and Noah warm. Then came 3 knocks on my door, and a voice asking for shelter, like it was a matter of life or death. I thought it was just one more problem for me to solve. But the man outside wasn't just some guy. And the worst part, you think you know who the villain of this story is. I thought so too. But what I discovered inside that briefcase and who was really hunting him turned my life upside down. Before I tell you this secret, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? The night the sky fell, I stood in the middle of the living room, barefoot on the cold floor, listening to the rain hit the roof as if someone had overturned an endless bucket on top of the house. Pine Hollow was already dark by nature, but that early morning it got worse. The power had been out for hours, and the thunder came so close, the window glass vibrated like it wanted to break free from the frame. The wood in the walls creaked with the wind, and the smell of dampness rose from the old carpet. I stood looking at the hallway where my kids were sleeping, trying to decide if I should run to them or hold the door that was shaking in its lock. The flame of 2 candles cast huge shadows on the walls, making everything scarier than it needed to be. I had placed pots in a basin under the leaks, but the sound of the tick-tick-tick was so constant it felt like a clock reminding me I had no luxury to fail. My flashlight was already weak, my phone almost out of battery, and the signal in that part of the neighborhood was a joke even on a good day. Outside, I heard the sound of a branch scraping the roof, and occasionally, the dry crack of something hitting the yard as if it had fallen from the sky. I wanted to tell you I was calm. I wasn't. I clenched my jaw until it hurt, because it was either that or start talking to myself. And I couldn't afford that kind of weakness with 2 kids in the house. I ran my hand over the doorframe, feeling the splinters, and tried to remember what I always did when life got tight. Solve one thing at a time. Breathe, Amber, I whispered like it was an order. And then I walked slowly to the bedroom, just to see if Mia and Noah were still covered, if they hadn't kicked off the blankets, if the water hadn't reached them. The room was dark, but I recognized every corner. Mia slept hugging a bear with a stitched-up ear, and Noah had his mouth half open, letting out little puffs of warm air that fogged the edge of the blanket. I crouched by the bed, tucked them in, and stayed there for a second, still, listening to the world break apart outside. When a louder thunderclap burst, I gripped the blanket tight and slid my hand over Mia's hair, as if that gesture could hold the entire house in place. Then I went back to the living room, because someone had to stand guard. I had barely taken 2 steps when the wind changed. Tone it got deeper, as if it had entered through the right crack. The candle closest to the window flickered and almost died. I stopped halfway, staring at the darkness of the porch, and it was in that second of strange silence that I noticed a sound different from the storm. It wasn't thunder, it wasn't a branch, it was, wait, footsteps, right on the front wood, right near my door. And I stood there, frozen, waiting for what came next. The knock on the door. I was still in the middle of the room when the pounding came. 3, dry, certain, thud, thud, thud. It wasn't the wind, because the wind scratches, pushes, makes scattered noise that sounded like a human hand. Decisive, knocking, like someone who has knocked on bad doors before, an ISNT, in the mood to be ignored. The candle trembled, and I stared at the entryway wood, as if it could explain what was happening. The rain kept hammering outside, but for an instant, the whole house seemed to hold its breath along with me. I took a step back without realizing it, and my hand went straight to the handle of the closet where I kept what could be called protection. It wasn't anything heroic, an old baseball bat of my brother's, with the tape already peeling on the handle. I held it and heard another sound behind me, the creak of the floorboards near the hallway. My body responded before my brain. I turned fast, flashlight in the other hand, and saw Noah standing in the bedroom doorway, eyes half closed, holding his blanket like a cape. "Mom," he whispered, scared by the noise. I put a finger to my lips and signaled for him to go back. Then came the voice, from outside, half muffled by the storm and the thick door. A male voice, hoarse, failing like he had swallowed water. "Hey, please." I skidded off the road. My car got stuck. "I just need a place until the rain passes." I didn't answer right away. I got closer, slowly, and pressed my ear against the wood, trying to fish for any detail breathing. More than one person, anything. The wind brought a smell of wet earth and gasoline, and I heard a metallic click outside, as if something had hit the railing. In my head, an ugly fight began. The part that is a mother screamed, "Don't open it." The part that is human, the one that has needed help and been ignored, pushed back. I looked at the hallway again, imagining Mia waking up, Noah crying, me having to explain why a stranger was on the porch. And that's when I heard my grandmother's voice, "Grandma, June," as if she was sitting in my kitchen with her coffee. Amber, sometimes God shows up in the most inconvenient way just to see who you are when no one is looking. I squeezed the bat handle until my knuckles turned white. It wasn't pretty church faith. It was the faith of a survivor. I reached the door and spoke loud, firm, without opening anything yet. "Who are you?" There was a short silence, and then he answered, "My name is Ethan, Ethan Hale. I don't want trouble. I have nowhere to go right now." I unlocked just the chain, leaving a minimal opening, and the flashlight beam caught a piece of his face pale skin, hair plastered to his forehead, water dripping from his chin. He looked destroyed, but there was something there that didn't match just anyone. The cut of the coat, the expensive ring shining for a second, the way he spoke, trying to be polite even while shaking. And when I saw what he was carrying in his hand, half hidden by the rain, I understood that night hadn't shown its worst yet. The stranger from the road. I opened the door just enough for him to slip through sideways, without giving him a chance to push me. The wind came in with him, carrying freezing rain and leaves, and I felt the candle almost die again. "Come in, slowly," I said, pointing the bat at the floor but making it clear I hadn't let go of it. He obeyed without arguing. When he stepped onto the living room floor, water started dripping off him in small puddles, and the heavy coat made a wet sound when he pulled it off his shoulder, like he was removing soaked armor. Up close, you could see the contradictions better. The stubble was from someone who hadn't slept right, but the hands were too clean for a guy who ditched his car on the road and went pushing things in the mud. And the clothes weren't just good, they were expensive in that discreet way. No screaming brand, just perfect cut. He looked around carefully, as if he didn't want to offend the house with his eyes. My sofa was old, the blanket had patches, and the table had a chipped corner. Even so, he nodded, as if that was enough, maybe more than enough. "I'm sorry to show up like this," he said, and his voice came out with a tiredness that didn't seem just from the rain. "I swear I tried." I saw the house, and he stopped, swallowed hard, and raised his empty hand in a peace gesture. That's when I noticed what he had been holding outside. It wasn't a gun, like my brain had screamed. It was a slim briefcase, one of those hard leather ones, stuck to his body as if it were part of him. Water ran down the handle, and he held it with too much force, like someone who knows what's inside and doesn't want to lose it. "You can leave it there," I said, pointing to the chair near the door. He hesitated, just a second, and then placed the briefcase on the floor, with exaggerated care. The sound of leather hitting the floorboards was low, but the way he did it put me on alert. I didn't know who Ethan Hale was, but I knew how to recognize when someone was carrying more than an object. There was urgency in that name, in that posture. He seemed like a man used to controlling things, and that night, he controlled nothing. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a mug. Coffee was the only luxury I kept, even when everything else was missing. The strong smell rose hot, and for a moment it gave me the feeling that I still ruled that space. "This isn't a hotel," I warned, putting the mug on the table. "But there's a dry corner and coffee. If you're lying to me, I'll notice." He let out a short breath, almost a laugh that didn't turn into a laugh. "I believe it. You have that look of someone who notices everything," he said, and it was so direct it caught me off guard. And then, from the hallway, came a small noise of dragging feet. Mia appeared behind Noah, rubbing her eye, hair messy, and stood looking at the wet man in our living room. I saw Ethan's body freeze for an instant, as if he had seen a ghost he didn't expect. He didn't take a step forward, didn't try an exaggerated smile, just lowered his head a little, respectful. "Hi," he spoke softly, as if entering a sacred place. And in that second, with my 2 kids staring at a rich, soaked stranger in our wooden house, I understood I had just put my family in the middle of something much bigger than a storm, and I still had no idea of the size. Conversations by candlelight. I pushed the 2 of them back to the bedroom with a quick kiss on the forehead, promising everything was fine, even without being sure of it myself. When they lay back down, I left the door ajar just to hear any movement. The house was small. Any sigh went through the walls. I went back to the living room and saw Ethan sitting on the edge of the sofa, back straight, hands on his knees, as if he were still in an important meeting. The rain made a constant noise on the roof, and the candlelight made his face half golden, half tired. "Do you want a towel?" I asked. He looked at me as if the word were rare. "If it's not a bother," he answered. I went to the closet and pulled out the only big towel that was still decent. When I handed it over, he took it carefully, as if it were borrowed from a museum. He dried his hair slowly, his face, and when he took off the coat completely, the shirt underneath was that thing you only see on people who buy clothes without looking at the price. But he didn't show off. He seemed ashamed to be there like that. I put another mug of coffee on the table and sat in the chair opposite, leaving the bat leaning by my side, where I could reach it. "So," I said, "tell me about the car." He explained he lost control on a curve near the service road, that the car slid onto the shoulder and got stuck in the mud. While he spoke, I paid more attention to his manner than his words. He had an educated vocabulary, but spoke like someone not used to asking anyone for anything. Every sentence felt like a negotiation with his own pride, and when he stopped in the middle, pursing his lips, I knew there was stuff there he wasn't saying. I don't know how, but the conversation shifted. Maybe it was the silence the storm creates between one thunderclap and another. Maybe it was the smell of coffee making the house feel like a real place for a few minutes. I said I worked when I could, cleaning stores, extra shift at the diner, delivery for the neighbor when she paid me with groceries. I told him Mia had a habit of drawing huge houses with pools, and Noah kept asking why we couldn't have a wall that doesn't cry water. I said it laughing, but my fingers gripped the mug tight, because I knew that kind of question a child asks without intention. And yet, it hurts. Ethan stayed quiet, just listening, didn't interrupt, didn't try to turn it into a lesson. At some point, he looked around not with pity, but with attention. The pot catching a leak, the blanket folded on the chair, the old photo on the wall I still hadn't had the courage to take down. "You built a safe place here," he said, very low. I almost let out a bitter laugh. "Safe," I repeated. "My door doesn't even lock right." He shook his head, like someone who understands something else. "Safety isn't just that," he said. "I walk into places with glass walls, security at the door, cameras, and even so I can't relax." Then he told me a piece of himself. Not everything, just enough for me to realize the rain wasn't the heaviest thing that night. He said he lived surrounded by people, but no one really listened, that everyone asked, pulled, demanded, and that he had gone driving aimlessly because he was full. The word was simple, but the way he said it felt like it was scraping him inside. I watched his jaw locked for a second, his gaze stuck on the candle flame, as if the answer were there, and I thought, "You don't look like a man lost on the road. You look like a man running from something." When thunder burst and the house shook, I saw him blink slower, as if he were too tired even to be scared. I leaned in a little and spoke, in a tone I only use with my kids when they have nightmares. "You can stay here until the rain passes. No drama, just respect my house." He raised his eyes to me, and for the first time since he entered, he let slip a small, crooked smile, almost relieved. "I respect it," he said, "more than you imagine." And that's when I felt that night wasn't bringing two strangers together by chance. It was preparing something, and I didn't know if it was a miracle or trouble. A night of peace. When the coffee ran out and the storm turned into a more distant noise, I got up and fetched an extra blanket from the bedroom. It wasn't new, it wasn't pretty, but it was warm. I went back to the living room and saw Ethan still sitting the same way, as if his body didn't know how to relax, even with permission. "You take the sofa," I said, direct, as if commanding a situation that could get out of control if I gave too much space. He let out a low okay and obeyed, taking off his shoes carefully so as not to muddy anything. That, for some reason, made me calmer than any pretty sentence. I spread the blanket over him and left a pillow at the end. He looked at it as if it were an expensive gift. "Thank you," he said. But it wasn't that automatic thank you. It was gratitude coming from someone who doesn't receive kindness without paying back. I stood there for a second, staring at the briefcase near the chair. He noticed my look and pulled the briefcase close to the sofa, placing it on the floor beside him, like a pet. "I know it looks strange," he said. "Just, it's important." I didn't ask what was in there. I just nodded. Sometimes, you feel that moving one piece brings down the rest. Before going to the bedroom, I passed by the window and opened the curtain just a crack. The street was a river of mud. The streetlight outside flickered, failed, came back, the branches on the ground looked like scattered arms, and the world had that look of after an accident. I closed the curtain and rested my forehead against the wood for an instant, as if that helped organize my thoughts. I brought an unknown man into my house. I did that. The sentence sounded crazy when I thought it loud, but at the same time, I hadn't seen malice in him. I had seen contained panic, wounded pride, and a tiredness that didn't match someone who lives well. In the bedroom, I lay down between Mia and Noah because they always calmer like that when the weather turns. Noah stuck to me without really waking up, and Mia mumbled something about angry thunder and turned to the side. I lay looking at the ceiling, listening to the rain lessen, and the leaks continue like small drops of stubbornness. And, on the other side of the house, I heard the slightest noise from Ethan, the sofa creaking, a long sigh, and then silence. A silence so clean it was scary, because silence, for those who live in hardship, is sometimes a warning. I couldn't sleep at first. The head keeps spinning. You know? I replayed every second since the knocks on the door, the tone of his voice, the way he held the briefcase, the way he looked at the kids. I thought about what my grandmother would say if she saw that. She would probably pray and then ask for the man's full name to do some research, because she was faith and suspicion at the same time. I smiled alone in the dark, but soon the smile vanished when reality hit. If this guy had trouble, I had just invited trouble inside. At some point, I got up quietly and went to the bedroom door. From the hallway, I saw Ethan lying on his side on the sofa, blanket pulled up to his chest, eyes open, staring at the dripping ceiling. He didn't look comfortable, but he looked calm, as if that bad roof and that simple silence had given him a pause his life didn't give him. I stood there, still, and spoke low, almost like a secret. "Good night, Ethan." He turned his face slowly, and the weak candlelight caught his gaze. "Good night, Amber," he answered. "Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists." I didn't answer back, because if I opened my mouth, I'd say more than I should. I went back to the bedroom and finally closed my eyes, and that's when I felt it. The storm outside had passed, but something had started inside that house. A strange feeling of belonging, as if to lonelinesses had touched by accident. But, deep down, I also knew tomorrow morning would bring questions, and I had the impression the name Ethan Hale wasn't just any name. The dawn of change. I woke up to a strange silence, the kind that only exists after the rain does its damage and leaves. The house still smelled of wet wood and old coffee, but the gray morning light entered through the curtain crack as if asking permission. Outside, the yard looked like another place, mud everywhere, a huge branch fallen near the clothesline, and the street pole blinking like it was tired. I got up slowly, stepping carefully not to wake the kids, and went straight to check the sofa. Ethan was sitting up, blanket on his shoulders, briefcase leaning against his leg, as if he had slept with one eye open. He turned to me and gave that small half-smile of someone who doesn't want to disturb. "I heard you moving. Thought I better get up." He spoke softly. I pointed with my chin to the kitchen. "There's bread. If you don't mind toast and cheap butter, you're in luck." He let out a short laugh, almost relieved, and for the first time, I saw him look normal. No pose. No rigidity of a man in charge. Mia appeared first, hair messy and looking like she hadn't decided if the world was safe yet. Noah came right behind, already curious. They stopped at the door and stared at Ethan as if he were part of the storm left inside the house. I waited for Ethan to do something stupid, speak loud, try to joke too much, anything that would scare them, but he just lowered himself a bit, getting to their level, and spoke in a simple tone. "Hi, I'm Ethan. Sorry for coming into your house like this." Mia wrinkled her nose, evaluating. Noah looked at my face, asking permission without words. I nodded once, and that was enough. In half an hour, it seemed the house had changed climates. The smell of toasting bread took over, and the kids started talking over each other, telling things no one asked to know. Ethan listened as if it were important news. When Noah complained about the window that whistles, Ethan got up without a speech, went there, and ran his hand over the frame, testing the gap. "Got electrical tape?" he asked. I pointed to the cupboard. He took it, wrapped it in the right place, pressing with his thumb until it stuck. The sound of the wind changed instantly. It didn't turn into total silence. Nothing here does, but it got less aggressive. Mia widened her eyes as if he had done magic. Then he went to the yard with me. I was going out alone, as always, because I've learned no one shows up to help when the mud is high. But he grabbed a broom, tied his jacket around his waist, and started sweeping the water away from the door, pushing leaves and dirt with force, no disgust. I watched him for a second and thought about the contrast. That guy had hands of someone who signs expensive papers, and yet there he was, dirtying his pants hem in my mud. If you've ever had the feeling of looking at someone and realizing you judged too fast, subscribe to the channel, because I also thought that visit was going to be just troubled. And the turning point started precisely in these small things. That's when I noticed his phone vibrating on the table, insistent, as if the life outside was trying to break into our morning. He looked at the screen, and his face closed off in a different way, very contained. It wasn't open fear, it was that micro-tension in the jaw, as if he were preparing for an old fight. He declined the call instantly, and turned the device face down. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He took a second longer than he should have to answer. "It is," he said, but his voice came out too low, and when another vibration hit, I saw the name that appeared for an instant before he covered it with his hand, and I understood that Ethan Hale had just skidded on a road. He had skidded into my life running from someone. The return and the revelation he left in the early afternoon, when the road finally looked like a road again, and not an infinite puddle. I walked Ethan to the porch with mud still stuck to my slipper, and he stood still for a second looking at the horizon, as if memorizing Pine Hollow so as not to forget. A car came to pick him up, not a rusty neighborhood tow truck, but an impeccable black SUV that seemed out of place there the same way he seemed the night before. When the door opened, I saw a man in a suit jump out fast, head down, saying "Mr. Hale," as if it were automatic. That was when my whole body understood the difference between stranger in the rain and someone the world obeys. I didn't say anything in front of my kids. Mia had a crumpled flower in her hand, and Noah held a bottle cap as if it were a gift. Ethan bent down, took the flower carefully, and said to Mia, "Thank you, I'll keep it." To Noah, he returned a short smile and put a hand on his shoulder, just a light, respectful touch. Then he turned to me and spoke low, as if he didn't want the air to carry it. "I'll be back." I let out a ma'am that sounded weaker than I wanted. He moved his head as if making a real promise. "I'm serious, Amber." And he got into the SUV with the briefcase in his hand, as if it were part of his body. When the car disappeared, the house felt too big again. I washed the dishes, swept the floor, did everything on autopilot, but my head wouldn't stop. I went to search his name on my phone, when the signal decided to cooperate for 5 seconds, and when I saw the local headline that gave me a silent punch. Ethan Hale, interim CEO of Hale Industrial Group, one of those companies you see sponsoring stadiums, hospitals, political campaigns. There was a photo of him in a suit, magazine smile, and I stared at the screen as if I had met a different person. The man who slept on my sofa didn't look like that guy. Didn't look like someone the world calls sir without thinking. In the following days, I tried to pretend that had been just a weird story to tell, and that's it, but he didn't leave my routine. Every time I passed the patched window, I remembered his hands pressing the tape. Every time I made coffee, I remembered him holding the mug as if it were something rare. And, more than that, I remembered the insistent calls, the name on the screen, the tension he swallowed without explaining. I didn't know what Hale Industrial Group was on the inside, but I knew how to recognize when someone was surrounded by people who don't let them breathe. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, I heard the sound of tires on my street again. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't a delivery. It was that kind of car the whole neighborhood notices. I opened the curtain and saw the same black SUV stopping, only this time no suit came running in a hurry. Ethan got out alone. No expensive coat, no pose, just a simple shirt, jeans, and a bouquet of flowers that wasn't extravagant, looked chosen at a grocery store, not an event. I opened the door before he even knocked, and he stood there, bouquet in hand, looking at me as if he had crossed an ocean. "I tried to go back to my life," he said, direct, no beating around the bush, "but I went back to a place full of people smiling for interest." He took a step forward, and I saw his jaw lock for a second before he let out the rest. "I cleaned house. I got corrupt people away from me. I fought with partners, with lawyers, with relatives. I thought I'd feel victory." He laughed without humor. "But it was all mute, because the first night in years I managed to sleep was on your sofa, leaks and all." I stood looking, not knowing what to answer, because that was absurd and real at the same time. He held out the flowers. I took them, feeling the damp paper on the stem, and he spoke the sentence that changed the air between us. I discovered my home is where you are. It wasn't a pickup line. It wasn't a movie line. It came out as a confession, with weight. Mia appeared behind me and shouted his name as if he were an old visitor. Noah ran and hugged his leg without asking permission. Ethan closed his eyes for a second, squeezed the briefcase handle. Yes. He still brought that briefcase, and I knew the part he didn't tell in the storm was still in there. And the way he looked at the end of the street, as if expecting someone to appear at any moment, I understood his return wasn't just romance. It was a decision, and maybe a war. The home heaven sent, I won't lie. When Ethan said that at my door, my first thought was, this is going to be trouble. Not because I didn't feel anything I did, but because I'd seen people promise the world and disappear when the world collected. But he didn't show up like someone wanting a pretty moment. He showed up like someone who made a decision that was going to upset half his world. And I saw it in the small things. The way he stood sideways, shielding the view of the house when a car passed the way. He kept the briefcase near his foot. The way he spoke to the kids as if they were the most important part of that conversation. The truth is, everything started to fit together fast. Not years later. Not like a long soap opera. It was in the now. In the next few days, in the rhythm of someone who has no time to pretend. He came back more times, always unannounced, and never with luxury. He came with useful things, tools, wood to reinforce the porch, a box of groceries he claimed were extra. I argued. I said it wasn't charity. He raised his hands, gave a short smile, and answered, "Then call it a trade. You gave me shelter when no one gave me anything. I'm paying it back." And I realized he wasn't trying to buy me. He was trying to earn his stay. If you've ever seen a rich person try to learn how to be human again, leave a like at the end of the video, because I swear that's rarer than it looks. But, along with the peace, came the hard part. His world started knocking on my door. Not with the crash of a storm, but with the pressure of well-dressed people. One day, a different car stopped on the street, and a woman got out, heels sinking into the mud like it was an insult. She looked at my house with controlled disgust and spoke my name like she was reading it off a spreadsheet. Amber Reed. I clenched my jaw. Ethan appeared by my side instantly, and his face turned to stone. The woman didn't scream. She didn't need to. She just dropped. "Do you have any idea who you're messing with?" Ethan answered in a low tone. Dangerous because it was so calm. "I know exactly." And when he put his hand on my waist, it was his way of telling the whole world I wasn't a shameful secret. I learned the truth about the briefcase that week. It wasn't money. It wasn't jewelry. It was paper, documents, proof. The kind of thing that makes powerful people nervous. Ethan told me, in my kitchen, with the dim light and the coffee getting cold, he had discovered that part of the family business was being drained by partners and a relative he trusted. He grabbed evidence, tried to take it to the board, and that's when the threats started, the calls, the persecution. On the night of the storm, he wasn't just driving aimlessly, he was trying to disappear for a few hours to avoid being found before getting that into the right hands. I didn't say, "Oh my God." I didn't make a scene. I just sat and squeezed the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white, because I had brought that near my kids without knowing. Even so, he didn't back down. He faced it. He kicked people out. He cut contracts. He changed security. He did what needed to be done, and, in the middle of it all, still came here to fix windows and take the kids for cheap ice cream, as if that were the most important part of life. And maybe it was. Because I saw Ethan change without becoming a saint. There were days he arrived irritated, slammed the car door, stayed too quiet. I didn't ask everything. I just put a plate on the table and said, "Eat, talk later." And he talked. And every time he talked, it seemed like he lifted a weight off his chest, not with pretty phrases, but with raw truth. When he asked me to marry him, there was no expensive restaurant or kneeling in front of an audience. It was in my backyard, with the sky finally clear, Mia playing with ribbons on the clothesline, and Noah running after a neighbor's dog. Ethan held my hand and said, "I don't want to take you out of here. I want to build with you here." I cried. Yes, but without a spectacle, just a warm, silent cry of someone who never thought she'd be chosen like that. Months later, we got married in that same backyard, with ribbons hanging, neighbors bringing food, a borrowed dress, kids laughing. And when I looked at Ethan at that sunset, I understood. The true shelter isn't a big house. It isn't a high wall. It's someone who stays when the sky falls. Today, when I look at our house in Pine Hollow, yes, we stayed here. I still remember the sound of the rain hitting the roof, and my hand frozen on the doorknob, deciding whether to open it or not. A lot has changed since that night. Ethan didn't become a movie saint, and I didn't become a CEO's wife who lives on magazine covers. The change was simpler and harder. We learned to live with truth, without buying affection, without pretending that problems disappear with money. Justice happened the way I respect most, quietly. Those who were draining the company fell because he had the courage to face his own blood and his own circle. And I saw, up close, what I never imagined I'd see. A man used to giving orders, relearning how to apologize, how to wait, how to listen. I saw him choose to stand on the right side even when it cost him his reputation, contracts, and convenient friendships. And I had to choose to, because loving someone like that means accepting that life can hit hard and you don't run away. Would I do it all again? I would open that door again, even with fear, even with no guarantees. Because that night, I didn't just save a stranger from the rain. I saved a part of myself that had forgotten how to believe in people. And you, would you have forgiven? Would you have opened the door? If this story hooked you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to remember that justice sometimes takes time, but it comes.